Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling this big question
Yeah, oh, yeah.
of how life even got started here on Earth.
I know, right?
It's such a fascinating question, and so I thought it'd be fun to dive into this
Yeah.
presentation. It's called Origin of Life on Earth,
Okay, cool.
and it looks like it's going to take us from the very beginnings of the planet all the way through the different theories about how life got started,
Yeah.
and even into the RNA World Hypothesis.
Yeah, the RNA world, that's always a fun way to talk about.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that one.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be really interesting, too, is just seeing how different early Earth
Yeah.
was compared to the planet we know today.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, what it must have been like back then.
Right, like volcanoes erupting all the time.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere was so different. It was like a completely alien world.
Yeah, the presentation talked about how it was constantly being bombarded
Oh, yeah?
by asteroids and meteorites.
Definitely, it was a very violent and chaotic time.
Not very hospitable.
No, not at all. And the atmosphere was a mix of gases like methane and ammonia
Right.
and carbon dioxide,
Right.
which would be toxic to most life forms we know today.
So how did life even have a chance?
Right. Well, over millions of years, the Earth gradually started to cool down.
Okay.
And all that water vapor in the atmosphere condensed,
Mhm.
and it rained and rained and rained
Oh.
until the oceans formed.
So the oceans were really key to life.
Absolutely. They were crucial. They provided this more stable environment, you see,
Oh, yeah.
shielding early life from all that intense radiation and those crazy temperature swings
Yeah,
that were happening up on the surface.
that makes sense.
So those early oceans, they were like a cradle for life to emerge.
So once the oceans formed, that's when things really started to get interesting.
Exactly. And this is where we get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
How did that first spark of life actually happen? Well, scientists have come up with
Yeah.
a few different theories,
Mm-hmm.
and the presentation talks about three main ones.
Okay, let's hear them.
So you've got the primordial soup theory,
Yeah.
you've got panspermia,
Uh-huh.
and then there's the hydrothermal vent theory.
Okay, well, let's start with that primordial soup theory. I've always kind of liked the sound of that one.
It's very evocative, isn't it?
Yeah.
So basically the idea is that early Earth's oceans were like a giant soup
Okay.
of organic molecules, all these different ingredients just swirling around.
Right.
And then you had lightning and UV radiation from the sun,
Okay.
providing the energy for these molecules to react with each other
Okay.
and combine and form more and more complex compounds.
So like a giant chemistry experiment.
Exactly. And eventually, these reactions led to the formation of self-replicating units,
Wow.
the precursors to life as we know it.
So it's like this primordial soup was cooking up the very first forms of life.
That's the basic idea.
That's pretty cool.
It is, but there are some challenges to this theory.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, for one thing, scientists now think that early Earth's atmosphere might not have been,
Not quite right for this process to work as well as we once thought.
So maybe this soup wasn't seasoned quite right.
Maybe not, but it's still an important theory
Okay,
that has helped us understand how life's building blocks might have come together.
great.
All right, so moving on to panspermia, this is where things get a little more out there.
Yeah, panspermia, that's the one where life comes from outer space,
Yeah,
right?
that's the one. The idea is that life didn't actually start here on Earth.
Wow.
It originated somewhere else in the universe and then traveled here.
How?
Well, maybe by hitching a ride on a comet or an asteroid.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
I know, right? But it's a fascinating idea.
Is there any evidence to support it, though?
Well, we do know that organic molecules have been found in meteorites.
Really?
Yeah, even amino acids, the building blocks of proteins.
Wow, so those building blocks could have come from space?
It's possible.
But if life didn't start on Earth,
Yeah.
where did it start?
That's the big question that panspermia doesn't really answer. Right, just kicks the can down the road.
Exactly. It just shifts the mystery of life's origins to somewhere else.
So it's still a very intriguing idea, but it doesn't give us the full picture.
Not quite.
Okay, well, what about that third theory, the hydrothermal vent theory?
Yes. This one focuses on those deep-sea volcanic vents.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of those. They look pretty incredible.
They're amazing, and they're incredibly hostile environments.
How so?
Well, they're superheated, the water is very acidic,
Right.
and it's full of toxic chemicals.
I wouldn't want to go swimming there.
No, me neither. But for some microorganisms, these vents are like a paradise.
Really?
Yeah.
Life can exist in those conditions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
These organisms are called extremophiles,
Oh, okay.
and they've adapted to thrive in these extreme environments.
Oh,
They actually use the chemicals released by the vents as their energy source.
that's amazing.
It is. And some scientists believe that the very first life forms on Earth might have been similar to these extremophiles.
So life could have started in these deep sea vents instead of a warm little pond.
It's a possibility. And what's even more interesting is that hydrothermal vents
Yeah.
aren't unique to Earth. They've been found on other celestial bodies, like Jupiter's moon, Europa,
Wow.
and Saturn's moon Enceladus.
So if life could have started in these vents on Earth, maybe it could have started in similar environments on other planets or moons?
Exactly. That's what makes the study of hydrothermal vents so exciting.
It's like opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
It really is.
Okay, so we've got these three main theories about how life might have begun:
Yeah.
primordial soup panspermia and hydrothermal vents. But before we dive deeper into those,
Okay.
the presentation takes a little detour to debunk an old idea:
Oh, yeah.
spontaneous generation.
Right. The idea that life could just arise out of nowhere from non-living matter.
Yeah, I remember learning about that in school.
It was a popular belief for centuries. I mean, you see maggots appearing on rotting meat.
Right.
And it seems like they just magically popped into existence.
But of course we know now that that's not how it works.
Exactly as our understanding of science progressed, especially in the field of microbiology,
Okay.
we learned that life doesn't just appear out of thin air. It comes from pre-existing life.
And that's called
Biogenesis.
biogenesis. Okay.
Yeah. And a key piece of evidence for this was Louis Pasteur's swan neck flask experiment.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that one.
He showed that even when you expose sterilized broth to the air, it won't grow any microorganisms
Okay.
unless those microorganisms can directly reach the broth.
So no magical appearance of life.
Yep. Just good science.
So that settles that life comes from life, but that still leaves us with the question of how those first life forms came about. And this is where things get really interesting, because the presentation introduces us to the RNA World Hypothesis.
This is a fascinating one.
So what's so special about RNA?
Well, unlike DNA, which primarily stores genetic information, RNA can do double duty.
Really?
It can store genetic information like DNA, but it can also act as a catalyst,
Okay.
speeding up chemical reactions just like enzymes do.
Oh, wait, so RNA can do both?
It can. It's pretty amazing.
That's impressive.
And this versatility makes RNA a very compelling candidate for the molecule that might have been at the heart of early life.
Okay, so imagine a world where RNA was doing everything, both storing genetic information and carrying out all the essential functions of life.
Exactly. That's the RNA World Hypothesis.
It's like a completely different way of thinking about the origins of life.
It is, and it's an idea that scientists are actively researching to understand how this simpler RNA-based world might have transitioned to the more complex systems that we see today.
Well, this has been incredible. So far, we've gone from a fiery, chaotic, early Earth.
I know, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, to the formation of oceans, the possibility of life arriving from space.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And now this whole idea of an RNA world.
And we're just getting started.
I know. I can't wait to see where we go next.
Me too. This is going to be good.
I'm really enjoying this deep dive so far.
Yeah, me too.
It's fascinating. Okay, so we're starting to get a picture of what early Earth might have been like, and it's pretty wild.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And we've touched on these three main theories for how life could have first appeared.
Right.
You know, primordial soup panspermia and hydrothermal vents.
It's like having all these pieces of a puzzle, but we're still trying to figure out how they fit together.
Yeah, exactly. And each theory seems to have its own kind of pros and cons, you know.
Definitely, and that's what keeps things interesting. An ongoing debate.
Well, I want to go back to that primordial soup theory.
Okay.
Because it's just such a vivid image. You know, this idea that early Earth oceans were like this rich mixture of all these organic molecules just swirling around, energized by...
Like this giant cosmic laboratory.
Yeah, and then you throw in lightning and UV radiation from the sun, and it's like...
Exactly. It's providing the energy for all these reactions to take place.
Right, so life's ingredients were just kind of cooking away in this primordial soup.
That's the idea.
But you mentioned earlier that there are some challenges to this theory.
Yeah, there are some things that don't quite add up.
Like?
Well, one of the big ones is that our understanding of early Earth's atmosphere has changed over time. Scientists now think that it might not have had the right mix of gases for this whole process to work as well as we once thought.
So the recipe might have been a little off?
Maybe a little. And another issue is that all that intense UV radiation at the surface could actually been harmful to those early life forms.
So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You need energy to get things started.
Right.
But too much energy can be destructive.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
So maybe the primordial soup theory needs a little tweaking.
Maybe, but it's still a valuable starting point.
Okay, well, let's move on to panspermia, because that's the one that I think really sparks people's imaginations, this idea that life could have come from outer space.
It's definitely a captivating idea, and there's actually some evidence to support it.
But really, like what?
Well, scientists have found organic molecules in meteorites. You know, those space rocks that fall to Earth?
Okay.
And these molecules include amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins.
So you're saying that the ingredients for life could have literally rained down from the sky?
That's the idea. And some researchers even believe that comets, those big icy bodies, could brought water and organic molecules to early Earth as well.
So it's possible that Earth was seeded with life from somewhere else in the cosmos?
That's one possibility.
But then that just leads to the question of where did that life come from in the first place?
Right. Panspermia doesn't really answer that question.
It just kind of pushes the mystery back further.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like saying, well, the package came from Amazon, but who made the stuff in the package?
That's a good analogy.
Okay, well, let's move on to that third theory then, the hydrothermal vent theory.
All right, so this one focuses on these deep sea environments where you have volcanic vents releasing heat and chemicals from the Earth's interior.
Yeah, those environments seem pretty extreme.
Oh, they are incredibly hostile by our standards. I mean, they're superheated. The water's incredibly acidic and full of toxic chemicals.
I think I imagine anything surviving down there.
But you'd be surprised, some microorganisms actually thrive in those conditions.
Really?
Yeah, they're called extremophiles, and they've adapted to use those chemicals released by the vents as their energy source.
So they're not just surviving, they're actually thriving in these extreme environments.
Exactly. They're amazing. And what's even more interesting is that some scientists think that the very first life forms on Earth might have been similar to these extremophiles.
So life could have started in these deep, dark, chemically rich environments?
It's definitely a possibility. And another cool thing is that hydrothermal vents aren't unique to Earth. We've found them on other celestial bodies like Jupiter's moon, Europa, and Saturn's moon Enceladus.
So if life could have started in those environments on Earth, it could be happening right now, somewhere else in our solar system.
That's a thought, isn't it?
It is. So we've got these three competing theories, all trying to explain how life got started.
Right.
But is there one that scientists currently favor, or is it still pretty much up in the air?
Well, it's important to remember that science is a process of discovery. So new evidence is always emerging.
Okay.
That could shift the balance in favor of one theory over another, or even lead to entirely new hypotheses.
So the mystery of life's origins is still very much unsolved.
It is, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Now, I want to revisit that RNA World Hypothesis for a second, because it's such a fascinating concept, you know, this idea that RNA could have been the key player in those early stages of life. So can you remind us what makes RNA so special?
Sure. So the key difference between RNA and DNA is in their structure and function.
Okay.
DNA, you can think of it like a master blueprint. You know, it's double-stranded, and it stores genetic information very stably. But RNA is more like a versatile tool. It's single-stranded, which allows it to fold into these complex shapes and perform a wider range of functions.
So DNA is like the librarian keeping all the genetic information safe and organized?
Yeah, I like
And RNA is more like the builder actually using that information to make things happen.
Exactly. And what's really remarkable about RNA is that it can actually do
both.
Yeah, it can store genetic information like DNA, but it can also act as a catalyst, speeding up chemical reactions.
So it can act like an enzyme.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why the RNA World Hypothesis is so intriguing. It suggests that in those early life forms, RNA might have been doing everything, both storing the genetic information and carrying out the essential functions of life.
It's like a whole different chapter in the story of life.
It really is. And scientists are trying to understand how this RNA world might have transitioned to the more complex DNA and protein-based systems we see today.
Now, speaking of trying to understand early life, the presentation also mentioned one of the most famous experiments in this whole field, the Miller-Urey Experiment.
Oh, yeah, that was a groundbreaking experiment.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So the Miller-Urey Experiment was conducted back in the 1950s by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, and it was basically an attempt to recreate the conditions of early Earth's atmosphere in a laboratory setting.
So they built like a mini early Earth in a flask.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They combined water vapor, methane, ammonia, hydrogen.
Okay.
These were gases that were thought to be present in early Earth's atmosphere.
Okay.
And then to simulate lightning, which would have been very common back then,
Right.
they zapped the mixture with electrical sparks.
And what happened?
Well, after just a week of running this experiment, they found something amazing.
What?
Amino acids had formed in the flask.
Amino acids?
Yeah, the building blocks of proteins.
Wow, so they actually created the building blocks of life in a lab.
They did. It was a huge discovery. It provided the first real evidence that these complex organic molecules, the molecules that are essential for life, could arise from simpler inorganic molecules under the right conditions.
It's like a glimpse into the very processes that might have given rise to life on Earth.
Exactly.
That's incredible. Of course, our understanding of early Earth's atmosphere has changed since then.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So there's some debate about whether they used the exact right mix of gases in the experiment.
Right.
But the basic idea that these complex molecules can form from simpler ones under the right conditions.
Yeah.
That's still a really powerful concept.
Absolutely. And it's inspired a lot of research since then.
So we've explored these main theories about how life might have begun. We've talked about the fascinating RNA world, and we've even looked at some groundbreaking experiments that have helped to shed light.
It's a pretty amazing story when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. But of course, the story doesn't end there. We still need to figure out how we went from those first single-celled organisms to all the incredible diversity of complex life that we see today.
Exactly. That's the next chapter in our journey, the evolution of complexity.
Okay, well, I'm ready for the next chapter. Let's dive in.
All right, let's do it.
So we've been talking about all these incredible possibilities for how life first appeared on Earth, you know?
It's mind-blowing.
It is, and it really makes you appreciate the ingenuity of life and how it's managed to not only survive, but thrive in all sorts of environments.
Absolutely.
But we left off talking about that big leap from single-celled organisms to multicellular life, you know, all the plants and animals and fungi that we see around us.
Yeah, that's a huge step in the evolution of life.
It is, and I know the presentation talks about endosymbiosis as a key process in making that happen.
Yeah, endosymbiosis, that's a really important concept.
Can you remind me what that is again?
Sure. So basically, endosymbiosis is how simple cells called prokaryotes, which don't have a nucleus, evolved into more complex cells called eukaryotes, which do have a nucleus and all these other specialized structures.
So how did that happen?
Well, the idea is that way back when these early prokaryotic cells, they engulfed other cells, but instead of digesting them completely, they formed this symbiotic relationship.
Like a partnership.
Exactly. And eventually, those engulfed cells, they became organelles within the host cell.
Organelles?
Yeah, like mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of our cells. They provide energy and chloroplasts, which allow plants to carry out photosynthesis.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me that the mitochondria and chloroplasts inside our cells were once free-living organisms?
That's the idea.
That's amazing.
It's like a cellular merger.
Yeah.
Two different entities coming together to create something entirely new and more complex.
But is there any evidence to support this theory?
Oh, yeah, there's quite a bit, actually. For example, mitochondria and chloroplasts. They have their own DNA separate from the DNA in the cell's nucleus. And that DNA, it closely resembles the DNA of certain bacteria.
So it's like they're carrying a genetic memory of their independent past.
Exactly. It's like a little piece of history written in their genes.
Wow. So endosymbiosis really revolutionized the way we think about how complex cells evolved.
It's a really powerful example of how cooperation and interdependence can drive evolution.
Okay, so we've got these more complex eukaryotic cells thanks to endosymbiosis.
Right.
But how do we get from single-celled eukaryotes to multicellular organisms,
Yes, the evolution of multicellularity.
Yeah.
That's another fascinating chapter in the story of life.
So how did that happen?
Well, it turns out that this transition from single cell to multicellular life, it actually happened independently in several different lineages.
Really?
Yeah, which is why we see such a wide variety of multicellular organisms today.
So different groups of organisms figured out how to become multicellular on their own.
Exactly. And when you think about it, multicellularity offers a lot of advantages.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it allows organisms to get bigger.
Okay.
And it also allows for specialization of cells. Different cells can perform different functions.
Right. Like in the human body, we have muscle cells and nerve cells and blood cells.
Exactly. All working together to keep the organism alive and functioning.
It's like having a team of specialists.
It is.
But I imagine there must have been some challenges, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, how do you get all those cells to work together in a coordinated way?
That's a big one. Communication becomes really important.
Right.
Cells need to be able to send signals to each other, coordinate their activities, and share resources.
It's like managing a city with billions of inhabitants.
Exactly. A lot of logistics involved.
So the evolution of multicellularity was no easy feat.
Not at all. It required a whole bunch of genetic and environmental changes.
Wow. Well, this has been an incredible journey.
It has been, hasn't it?
We've gone from a fiery, chaotic early Earth to the emergence of the first single-celled organisms, to the evolution of complex cells, and then this incredible diversity of multicellular life.
It really shows you the power of evolution.
It does, and it makes you realize that we're all part of this grand narrative of life on Earth.
We are all connected to those very first life forms.
It's truly humbling.
It is, and even though we still have so much to learn about the origins of life, the quest to understand our beginnings continues to inspire scientists all over the world.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the origins of life.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring and questioning and marveling at this incredible story of life on our planet. Until next time, this is The Deep Dive signing off.